Live from Liverpool, we need to talk about ghosts with Kevin Eustace.
Yes, it is We Need to Talk About Ghosts, and I am Kevin Eustace. Now, the first thing you've probably noticed is that this episode is short, and there's a very good reason for that. Big news. This is the last episode of We Need to Talk About Ghosts until Halloween. Now, there's a reason for that, obviously. I've explained this to our Patreons through the week, but I've asked them to keep stum on it, so that's why this is the first you're hearing of it if you're not a Patreon. So, in a nutshell, let me try and be positive on this. You will have noticed in recent episodes that I've kind of gone off the boil a bit, right? And you will have, perfect example for this. The last couple of episodes, you'll have noticed at the start, it's me saying, if you're not interested in the ramble, please go to this point in the show and you'll go right to the ghost stories. Now, what I realised is the show has evolved into something I never wanted it to be. And that's a kind of a show in two halves. First half me rambling and the next half ghost stories. And I didn't ever want it to be like that. And yes, some people really like that. And I really like that you like that, if I'm being honest. Thank you very much. But the show, I'm all for the rambling. But the show should be rambling about the paranormal. And it's not. The point in question, the other day when I recorded the last episode from Sunday Gone, there was a point where I realised, something needs to change here. And what that was as I finished the ramble at the first half of the show, I sighed when I was about to do the ghost stories. And I caught myself doing it and I was like, what the frig? I shouldn't be doing that. This is a ghost story podcast. And I think I've tried to evaluate why that was over the last week. And I think the reason for it is because the show, it's down to me, because the show has become so separated, like rambling and ghost stories. I think by the time I got to be doing the ghost stories, something in my brain was like, well, these need to be done straight now. The fun has gone. And yes, I still have a little bit of a conversation after it, but I don't know. Basically what I mean is, in an ideal world, the show should be those two things combined throughout. It should be one happy experience of like bit of brevity, scare, as opposed to brevity, scare. And the fact that aside as I was doing it, thought, hold on, I should be enjoying this. And I'm not, this was a chore. And it's not fair on you guys for the show to continue like that. It's really not, especially because you have took the time to send stories in and I'm sighing before I'm reading them out. How fucking rude of me, seriously. And I genuinely feel that. That's not me just being like, oh, whoa. I'd be gutted if I sent a story into someone. And this is no slate on the stories sent in. They were fantastic. But I found that I was just reading them. And I know that that's my job. But I mean, I was just reading them. I wasn't engaged with them. Getting back to, I've told you when I'm a lapsed Catholic. When I was a Catholic, this is the only analogy I can think of. And patrons are like, you used that on the Patreon show? Yes, I did. But this is the only one I've got. A priest came into school and said, do you know, if you're just saying the words of the Our Father and you're not thinking about those words, then it's a completely pointless prayer. Now, in my head, I thought, shit, that means I'm not getting brownie points with God. So then I made a concerted effort then to make sure I was trying to think about the prayer itself, if that makes any sense. Now, when you're reading something you enjoy, like ghost stories, and I fucking love ghost stories, do you know what I mean? Like, I think if you could do like some sort of stop, the way your Apple phone or your phone in general will tell you how long you've spent on the internet or how long you've spent on an app. If there was something that could plug into me, which would say how long I spend listening, watching, discussing the paranormal per week, it would shock people. Genuinely, people would go, how do you find time to go to the toilet? So I love the paranormal. And therefore, when I'm reading ghost stories, especially ghost stories users sending in that I've never heard before, that engagement should be there. It should be there. And I've been questioning why it's not. And the only reason I can think is because the show's kind of lost its way. And yes, a lot of people will be saying, well, I like it how it is. Please don't change it. I like it how it is. And that's all well and good. And I really appreciate the fact that you're saying that. But what you need to bear in mind is I'm driving this car. This is the analogy I've again used on Patreon. And if I've lost enthusiasm for driving that car, it won't be long before it hits a tree. Do you know what I mean? And then there's no car. So keeping the car analogy. Oh, just punched the microphone. Some things will never change. Keeping the car analogy. I've talked about rebrands in the past, and I've talked about all this changing the show name and stuff. Don't want to do any of that because win tag's win tag, you know, and it's, without sounding conceited about the whole thing, it is kind of known amongst people now, you know, and I'm known as the host of the show, and you guys know it as win tag, and it's, you know, it's doing its own thing out there in the ether. So I don't want to kind of lose its personality, but it does need the car, the show in the version of a car needs an MOT and a repaint. It does. It's the same car, but it definitely needs to pique my interest again. I need to regain control of it. And you could say, well, couldn't you just keep the show going and rebrand it as you go, like mold it as you go? And the simple answer is no. And again, with the car analogy, you can't do an MOT or a repaint on a car when it's on the road. You just can't. It's impossible. And if you try it, you're going to crash. Of course, you're going to crash if somebody's painting your car as you're driving down the motorway. That's not safe at all. So, in a nutshell, we're going to be back at Halloween. Okay. Now, I know normally we would do a Halloween special, right? Where me and Becca go out and investigate things and we do that. It doesn't feel right to do a relaunch of a show with that as a first episode because it doesn't let anyone know what the format's going to be going forward. It's not realistically helpful. Basically, that's just me saying, I'm taking 5 weeks off, see you later. And that's not the point. I don't want anyone to think that. Now, and also with the next thing that I want to say, I made a note of this during the Patreon that I done to announce to them. The Patreon shows are going to keep going because when the reformatted show comes about, I'm going to keep the Patreon exactly the same as it is now in terms of what the shows are. One midweek ramble and a paranormal show on the weekend. And I'm going to say that to people when the new show comes around to say, if you want an informaler version of Kev, it's basically going to be the Kev who done the show. And it's still going to be me doing the show, you know. You might even listen to the reformatted show or relaunched show and think, I can't see what's changed. He's still rambling. But what you should notice is that the rambles will be based around the paranormal. It won't be me saying, 5 minutes about going to the supermarket and stuff. And some people like that, fair enough. But the show's become stagnant. It really has. So the stuff about rambling and where I'll ramble about my personal life, that's all going to go into Patreon. There'll be touches of it in the show because I'm me, and you know what I'm like. I've got verbal diarrhea, so stuff like that's going to happen. But yeah, what I wanted to say, getting back on track, because, you know, I can't stay on a topic, is this isn't a Patreon grab. It's not me saying, there's still shows on Patreon, so if you want to still listen for the next 5 weeks, go to Patreon. It's me trying to be as honest as I can about explaining the situation. So there will be that old school sort of style Halloween-ish special on the Patreon for those guys, but that's mainly just as a thank you to them for supporting, you know. So this isn't a Patreon grab. I'm just trying to explain what is actually going to happen. It's just an honest statement. Patreon shows are going to continue for the next 5 weeks because they don't need to change. People who have signed up to Patreon have signed up because they've listened to me and seem to like me. Thank you very much. And they get more of me over there. That's as simple as that. So it's not a Patreon grab at all. So the point of it being anyway is when the show relaunches at Halloween, I know it seems like a fair enough time to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's a fucking ghost, pardon the French. It's a ghost show. So why not Halloween? And yeah, when it relaunches at Halloween, any ramble, I'm going to ramble. Do you know what I mean? I'm literally the world's worst person. I think if somebody said, talk, you know, on QVC where they're like, talk about a pencil for 5 minutes, I'd go, yeah, I can talk for 5 minutes. Guarantee you within 3 sentences, I'm going to be talking about a camel. But anyway, so the rambling's still going to be there, but it should be based around the paranormal. It is my point. It should be a paranormal show. I mentioned this again when I was announcing this earlier through the week, is there was a review recently, and I know people could say, oh, you shouldn't listen to reviews, but you know what? Sometimes you should. Sometimes it makes sense you've got to, not even if the review said, what the fuck is this? I'm 7 minutes in and there's no ghost mentioned. Now, yeah, all right, the vernacular could have been different and a little bit more, hi, have you ever thought about this? But the key message is right, in all honesty. If you don't know the backstory of the show, if you're not familiar with the neighbour's cat, you're not familiar with the dynamic between me and Becca, if you haven't been there for a while or listened to a few episodes, just listening, coming right in fresh to a new episode, I would be like, what the fucking hell is this? And I completely got it. And, you know, I want this show to be fresh. I want this show to attract new listeners as well as the old ones that we've got. Because as much as I love the current fan base, and I fucking do, because you're a diehard and it's brilliant and I love it to death. It's not going to grow in the nicest possible way. I think I've milked all you guys for stories. Do you know what I mean? I think I genuinely have. And I love them, and they're great. The show growing just allows more stories to come in. Do you know what I mean? It allows it to grow. It allows it to shape. And I do think also, you know, the show's been the way it has, or it's evolved to the way it has over 3 years. It's 3 years old. And it's realistically not changed much within that. So I think it is time for a freshen up. And I'm saying a lot because I know that this is a bit of a, you know, it's a strange message, but it's one that I need to do. And that's getting back to the key grounds of whatever you think it's right or wrong. The person driving the car isn't happy at the minute. And I need to be re-excited. And I'm really sorry if anyone's like, well, fuck you. You know, I completely get that. I do sincerely apologise if that's the case. My intention is obviously not to put anyone's nose out of joint over this. But at the same time, as how do you best say this? I can't keep doing something that I'm not satisfied with just to keep other people happy. Especially when I'm my own master in this. It'd be a really weird thing to continue to do. So hopefully you'll support this decision, and you'll support when I buy a pop stand, so that when I say words like support, it doesn't go anyway. But yeah, I hope that you're on board with this. I do apologise that there'll be no shows up until Halloween. And like I say, you know, for the ones who, it will be nuanced changes. So it'll be me rambling about the paranormal is the point. I won't have to putting that disclaimer at the start, and it was dead good. Do you know what I mean? And like, it's a good idea. Like, you listeners have suggested it. When people, like you have said, when people moan about you rambling, why don't you put something at the start to say? And like I say, I think I had Brennan doing it, and it was like, that worked really well. But they have a paranormal chat beforehand, and even they do it. Do you know what I mean? But I was like, yeah, okay. But then when I'd done it, I thought, why am I advertising at the start? But yeah, this is it. I'm advertising at the start of the show. Some of you aren't going to like 50% of this show, so skip it. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing there? Why am I openly saying this isn't for everyone, so some of you can just fuck off till halfway through? No, it's not right. It should be for everyone, or at the very least, it should be like, you know, it should be a show that everyone can enjoy. So I hope you're on board with this decision in a nutshell. If you're not, I sincerely apologise. And if you want to stop listening, completely get it too. Do you know what I mean? I just need to do it. If you are a patron, if you've signed up to Patreon in the last week and you're like, hey, why isn't he singing my name? I think we can all agree the bride looks wonderful. Now, I think we can all agree this isn't the show to go. Anyway, Patreon song. So what we'll do is we will say thank you to anyone who signed up in the last week and over the coming weeks in the Halloween show that we launch with. We may still sing patrons' names. I don't know how the show... I haven't even looked at how the show is going to work. I just know what I want it to be. And that's 90% paranormal. It's currently 50 or less. So that's the point. Anyway, I hope I've said anyway so many times. And God, I wonder if somebody could just splice all my anyways and in this. Probably be about 4 minutes long. I was about to say anyway then. I'll say however instead. However, I do hope that you support this decision. If you are on Patreon, not on changes, I'll speak to you through the week. And if you're not on Patreon, you want to go and sign up, then you can. I'm not going to advertise where it is, because then it will sound like a Patreon grab. It's been mentioned in other shows and it'll be in the show notes, but I'm not, it's not a Patreon grab at all. Anything else to say? Yeah. No, there's not actually. I just, thank you for listening to this. Thank you for supporting the show as it stands for the last 3 years. Don't worry, it's not going to change in a way that it'll make you all hate it. I guarantee you. It can't, because it's me, and I can't divert too much away from being myself, because that's insanity. However, it does need a lick of paint, at the very least. So, with that in mind... Oh, also, just importantly to say, God, I can't end anything. Honest to God. Tell you what, Becca's lucky, because I'm never going to finish this relationship. Just couldn't get around to it. Anyway, it's important to say that when the show does relaunch, you won't have to research for it, okay? You won't have to, it's not going to disappear off. All the show's still going to be there. What you'll probably notice is it says episode 1, although the rest will still be underneath it when it does relaunch. So you're not going to have to research for it or anything like that. If you've subscribed, it'll just stay there. Do you know what I mean? And it'll update when it updates. So yeah, that's the only other thing I wanted to say. Anywho, I hope that you're all fantastically well and remain well for the next few weeks until I speak to you again at Halloween. Okay? Thank you for listening to this. And again, I hope to speak to you all at Halloween if you're still here to listen. Okay. I love you all. Tatty bye.